Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Public Education Summit of 2015, Taxation Without Representation on the Impact of Mayoral Control of Schools here in Washington, D.C. My name is Guy Brandenburg. I'm a retired D.C. public school teacher, also a blogger, and a parent of two happy and productive D.C. public school grads. Today we're discussing a very serious topic, the impact of mayoral control of public education in D.C., which has been in effect since 2007, in light of the recent National Academy's report. I want to introduce our guests. They are from this way around. We have Mary Levy, is independent analyst of education, finance, and policy, and she is one of the core reviewers of the National Academy's report. Next to her, we have Denisha Jones, an assistant professor in the School of Education at Howard University, who just recently informed me that she used to teach at my wife's school, where she's still teaching. And then we have Thomas Bird, who is the host and executive director of the Education Town Hall radio show and chairman of the Ward 8 Educational Council, another one of the reviewers of the National Academy's report. So we have some real expertise here. And then we have Elizabeth Davis, president of the Washington Teachers Union. And lastly, but not least, we have Adele Cawthorn, famed adjunct professor at Loyola College in Maryland. And so, welcome to all of you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
After 8 years now of mayoral control of public education under something called PARA, Public Education Reform Amendment Act, we finally have a very long, detailed, and expensive report from the National Academies of Science. And the question is, what are its major findings? Would you like to start?
Absolutely. First of all, my focus was always on education when I read the report, and one of the things it pointed out was that a change in the governance structure alone is not what is going to be needed in order to give us the results we expect to get under mayoral control. The report focused on 4 major areas, which I'm hoping that we will talk about in more detail on this program. Accountability and cross-sector collaboration were 2 of the areas. The focus of the study that was of interest to our members was that of student achievement over the past 8 years under PARA, and also how it has impacted whether or not the reform strategies that had been put in place over the past 8 years has actually helped the neediest students in our school district. So, and of course the report indicated that under mayoral control, the city has not done very well in those 4 major areas, which is cross-sector collaboration, better city-wide coordination, the better mobilization of civic capacity in the city, and of course better student achievement. The latter is the one that our union has been most interested in.
Adele.
And so the part that sticks out most for me as a former DC administrator is the dismal effects of what was supposed to be a very groundbreaking piece of legislation that really did not have a significant impact on student achievement for the students of DCPS, especially when you look at the subgroups of students with learning disabilities or students of color or students living in poverty. So it begs the question, what needs to change in DCPS to see some really effective initiatives to go forward to really support the most impacted students within the school system. So that's something that I would like us to address in depth, maybe not today, but definitely in another segment, because there are many initiatives that other urban school systems have taken on that prove to be effective. And so the question is, why not in DC?
Mm-hmm. Would you like to add something, Mary?
I will add 2 points. One is that with student achievement, they talked about the test scores and actually found that the achievement gaps between the advantaged students and disadvantaged students have increased. They couldn't talk about much more because they said they were unable to make any definitive findings about student outcomes other than test scores due to poor quality or unavailable data. In other words, we don't even have much information to go on. And this is after 8 years of what is supposedly data-driven performance, and we don't really have the data. The other point I would make is that one of the areas that they were supposed to address was accountability. Well, there's accountability for teachers with a vengeance. There's accountability for principals with a vengeance. But they didn't even address accountability otherwise. There's no accountability discussion about the whole governance structure and the people running the system.
Right, that's a major topic. I wanted to go into some more detail. What was left out and why? But would you like to add something, Tanisha?
Yes, one of the areas of interest to me because of my work in teacher education is, of course, where the report talked about teacher evaluation and the impact. That was the measure is called impact that they used. And so I find it interesting that they talked about, kind of the support that teachers get under impact, the way it's evaluated, the way it's rated. And one of the big issues is that they can't compare it to teachers in charter schools because they don't use the same rating. So it's really frustrating to see that on that level, because how can you say that the charter school system is producing better gains when their teachers aren't evaluated under the same metric as the DC public school teachers? So that's very interesting. They also talked about the support that teachers are supposed to get, right? Because you're supposed to improving teacher quality by rating them, and then also the support. And I think if you look, the support piece is what's really missing. Are we going in and saying, okay, teacher, you do this well, you don't do this as well, let's have you improve? Or are we going and saying, you don't do well, bye? There's a difference. What do you want? We want to improve teachers and make teachers better. And you're not getting that out of the current impact system. And I think that shows through that they're not following up with the resources. It's more of a gotcha system where we're just trying to identify bad teachers without helping teachers, especially new teachers, adapt to the new system. Impact is massive. It's a long process, and I don't think teachers know what they're being evaluated on.
Guy, I want to first thank you for inviting me to be here today, and to my esteemed friends, old and new, it's a pleasure to be here with you as well. And I want to begin by saying it is a huge report. This is it right here, folks. I also want to say that I was totally against mayoral control, totally against it. There has been nothing to date that has changed my mind, including this report. And as you mentioned at the top, I was one of the reviewers. Just one piece out of it is supposed to make changes to bring about improved coordination, efficiency, and accountability. None of that has happened, in my opinion. And I think that we need to go back to, we need to consider doing something different.
Okay. And let me add a couple of things. I hope the cameras can pick up this little graph. And I took this from the report, from that exact same report. The only difference is I put some color on it. So what it shows here is what happened in the DCPS's NAEP scores. That's one of the standardized tests. From before mayoral control was installed here at this line in about 2007, 2008. And this is after mayoral control, and this is before. And you can see there's generally rising tide there. And I don't see much of a difference before mayoral control and after mayoral control. That's not spelled out enough. This is sort of in the appendices. And another graph, same sort of thing. We have the gaps, which Mary talked about, between the DCPS white kids and black kids and Hispanic kids and so on. The gap here, this was before mayoral control, and this is after mayoral control. I do not see a difference. Maybe this one it didn't expand, but in this one it stayed the same. And however many millions of dollars were spent on that. Another one, these are the gaps according to the data in the report, and this is just from 2009 to 2014. The gaps are pretty much stationary during that period. They did not give the figures for before that. And we also have the gaps in, this is in mathematics. Again, the gaps are pretty much staying the same. And that's a lot of money to spend. And when we talk about the impact on teachers, which are the people delivering the things, the education, if you take a look at impact scores, this is the evaluation process that they were talking about, if you go to work in a low-income school, your scores are going to be lower than if you work in a high-income school. And I would like to emphasize that every single teacher that is in DC public schools now has either hired under mayoral control, under Michelle Rhee or Kaya Henderson, or has passed with flying colors every single one of the assessments that they have had for the past 8 years. So you can't say it's just the old people who retired like me say. You can't blame it on me.
No.
I didn't do it. I wasn't there.
And and Guy, as a teacher of 40 years in the district, and you and I worked in the same school, teachers are evaluated after 1 year of ineffective evaluations. They are given another year excess and terminated. We've had 2 chancellors over the course of 8 years. We have spent $8 billion, close to it. And we have not, and the results that we've gained from that much money, we have replaced 3,300 teachers. So we can't use the bad teacher narrative anymore.
No.
But after 8 years, 2 chancellors, under mayoral control, we expect, the city of DC should expect better results than that. And teachers would not be given 8 years. The academic achievement gap has increased over the past 8 years. That is not data coming from Mary Levy, the teachers union. It is coming from 3 major research sources. Education Week reported that the achievement gap in DC since over the past 8 years has widened. That students are doing not the same, worse. The
Right.
neediest students are doing worse now than they were 8 years ago. There ought to be outrage about that,
And
especially after the money. 40 schools closed, replacing 3,300 teachers, spending almost $8 billion, and having 8 years to do it. It's inexcusable.
I mean, you're absolutely right, because when Michelle Rhee came in and then now Kaya Henderson, they've virtually replaced the teaching force,
Absolutely.
And so you're talking about accountability. When are they going to be held accountable? The mayor as well as the chancellor, because that's their team that's in place. They can't talk about teacher quality because you hired these folks and you put them there. So if we're not getting results, then we need to look at maybe there needs to be accountability on the part of the chancellor and the mayor.
Absolutely.
We've talked about some of the findings of the report, although we could certainly have gone on for an hour on that topic. But for the next little segment, what I wanted to talk about was what were the writers of the report unable to document, and what reasons did they give that they were unable to document these results? Mary, why don't you start us off?
Okay, I'm the numbers lady.
Yes.
For the
Indeed.
public at least. They have an entire appendix devoted to the information that they were unable to acquire. Much of this is standard information that's available from other states and from other school systems. It wasn't that they were asking for anything unusual. Certainly one big area was data from the charter schools, because that's largely unavailable. Unfortunately, DCPS data and OSSI data are not much better, and just a few examples. They weren't able to handle the budget information, so they didn't make any findings on budget because it was too opaque. They couldn't deal with the SAT scores. The college board information, they couldn't even find out exactly which students were included in the public reports. They couldn't get staff counts for OSSI or for DCPS Central Administration.
By the way, for our viewers, OSSI is the Office of the State Superintendent of Education. There's sort of a real mix-up of lots and lots of agencies that overlap and not clear authority. Sorry.
Yeah, that's an important finding, a very important finding of the report. They didn't have enough quality data on attendance and truancy to analyze it. There's all sorts of information about teachers that they couldn't get. Now, I think they did not always know why they were unable to document it. In some cases, the data are never collected. In other cases, no one would give them the data, and this is certainly an experience that I've had
Yes.
as a researcher.
I actually knew somebody who was working in the data department of DC Public Schools, and he thought his job was to produce data on the students he was working with so that he could provide it to the teachers so that they could actually use it to help the students. But he was categorically told, no, 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 you can never do that.
You know, that's interesting because, you know, when they did the report, the evaluators didn't have access to data. But whenever DCPS is trying to make a point, they always have data. So what's going on? You can't have it both ways. Either they have the data and they don't want to give it up, or they're so incompetent the data is just floating around out there. They don't know how to lock it down.
Well, it is partly incompetence, but also it is deliberately misleading. So if you have a whole bunch of indicators that are going down and you find one that goes up a little bit, you put that on the front page of the Washington Post like they did yesterday. There's a slight uptick in graduation rates, but there's a whole lot of stuff that's totally unclear about that because they keep changing the requirements. And my friend Eric Martell has been documenting how they'll get people to graduate by having them come in one afternoon and filling out a couple of worksheets, and they call that credit recovery. So is a diploma really worth anything at all?
And on that note, I am a member of a credit flexibility task force, which is beginning to look at new other measures for determining how students can graduate other than by using the Carnegie unit. My concern is social promotion, and I've been a teacher for 40 years, a guy in the school district. It is wonderful for us to improve our graduation rates. What concerns me is if we are going to do it the right way, where students, after they've graduated, will be able to do something, either enter a university or continue on with some internship program or apprenticeship program. But the graduation rate climbing does not necessarily mean that we're doing right by students. Eric Martell mentioned credit recovery. Credit flexibility, we've got to be very clear on what the purpose of it is and whether or not we are graduating students who are prepared to do something, to continue their education or prepared to work. We do not want to create another system by which students are going to be conveniently graduated, where we're going to inflate coursework.
For the sake of graduation
For the sake
rates.
of graduation. So we want to be very careful about that.
We see this at the university level. I mean, we get students who come in with a high school diploma, and they have to spend a year taking non-credit courses in math and English because they can't pass the requirement test, the basic requirement test. So we question the value of their high school diploma. Where's the mismatch? Is it our test is not measuring, or is it your test, or how did they get out of there? But we know that's happening. As I mentioned, my dad is a Washington native, D.C. resident, went to Eastern High School,
So did I.
got to college and was told that the work he was doing was not correct. He's like, but this is how I graduated high school. And no one in high school had told him what he was doing was wrong, that he was actually plagiarizing and doing things like that till he got to college. And so when my brother was in high school, he put a stop to it. He said, you're not going to do it like this, to the point where the teachers didn't believe my brother did his own work. And my father had to go down there and say, no, 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 I didn't want him to get to college and be in the same trouble I was. So we did this report together. I made him research it at the library. I mean, so yeah, we see this happening with kids coming into college and they don't have the basic skills, or they're not getting, they're not even getting into Howard University because they can't, because they don't have the scores when they take the test to get in, and it's very frustrating, and there's a disconnect between what's happening, and that social promotion is a big part of it.
It is.
So the irony of the situation is that DC has hitched its wagon to Common Core and Park and this whole college and career ready. So what concrete evidence do we have from DCPS, OSCE, and all the other constituencies that we really are producing students who are college and career ready? It's incredulous to me as a former principal who got dinged several times on several occasions for not submitting this piece of data on absenteeism, but yet the broad picture is when DCPS is asked as a whole, where's this data? Oh, all of a sudden we don't have it. Well, I know as a former principal there were constant emails, bordering on harassment. You must submit this data point. Submit it now. We need it now. Okay, so where is it? Because I know I submitted it. I know my colleagues submitted it. But back to the whole college and career ready. Once again, at what point are the citizens of D.C. going to create an uprising of how long do we allow the school system to operate under the cloak of darkness? Like, when do we, as citizens, and I'm not a DC citizen, but very involved in the situation, when do we hold them truly accountable for not giving students, I wouldn't even say an adequate education. I mean, when are we going to really hold them accountable?
That's a wonderful question. You know, I mean, we could spend a whole show on that guy. But you know, I have to say this. You know, with regard to governance in D.C., it only dates back to 1973. So we're kind of really we're not a state, but we're young in terms of governing ourselves. So we had a real push to be energetic in civic engagement back then to get to where we are. I mean, to get to governing ourselves. But now there's been some complacency, and that is taking place within the education community as well, parents, community members, and such. And we got to get back to a place where, you know, hey, that's the top priority, you know, because educating our children should be the top priority. And as a community at large, we are not there. We've kind of moved off that mark, and we kind of got distracted by all these other things.
One thing that I thought was brought out in the report was that there is less and less accountability to the population, because you were talking about the beginnings of home rule here in D.C. The first organization was the school board. Now, we did have some people on the school board who were a total embarrassment. But I tell you, with the the cheating scandals around Michelle Rhee, she is a national embarrassment, not just a local embarrassment. She is incredible.
But manages not to get blamed for anything that she did. Manages not to be found guilty. I mean, look at what happened to Atlanta, and let's look at Michelle Rhee. How in the world is that possible that she did not face any sanction for what she did here?
Because Michelle Rhee is carrying water for some very powerful people.
Very powerful
Let's
people.
just be honest about it. She is doing the
and
bidding.
Beverly Hall was not, unfortunately.
And Beverly Hall was not. So you look at
put out to take the blame for all of what happened. And I don't think there was much difference betwing what she did and what Rhee did.
Not at all.
No.
Not at
But
all.
you're right, it was who backed too.
Right. And those same backers are all over the globe.
Right.
What is playing out here in Washington, D.C. is just a small sampling of what is playing out globally.
Yes.
Privatization is one. But the Para report talked about accountability. And it didn't talk about accountability only at the local school level, which is where everybody seems to want to place it. It talks about accountability straight up the chain of command to the mayor's office and beyond. So if structures are put in place to raise the bar for everybody, for students, teachers, and for local schools, it should be, the structures need to be put in place to support teachers and schools reaching that bar. That has not happened. And informing the public, and of course, we trust our leaders when they make decisions around education in schools. But we're going to have to begin to, this report was commissioned by the city. Whether or not the city, the mayor, the deputy mayor, the council is going to use it as a roadmap to effect change, that's what we need to ask why. Why did we spend millions for this report if we're not going to use it to fix anything? Because the report clearly states the lack of transparency, the lack of open government, the failure to produce evidence, and everybody's saying every decision I make is evidence-based. It is not. Right now, we don't know where's the evidence that says we need credit flexibility. I'm asking for that. We have not seen it. Where's the data that says why students are not graduating? It varies across the city. And we need to have that information in order to make an informed decision about credit recovery, credit flexibility, school closures, whatever. And we're simply not doing it. We use data when it's convenient to do what it is we want to do.
Yes.
Yep.
That's
I think it would help to have some independent
Truly
organization
Absolutely.
that looked at information and that had access to the information that there is. Because right now we do not have that. In the city of Chicago, the University of Chicago is host to a consortium that looks at what's going on there. Lots and lots of problems there, but at least we have somebody who's looking at it independently. And of course, because of our peculiar governance structure, you know, we don't have a state that's separate from the local.
Yeah.
Right.
So everything funnels right back to the mayor. The mayor is in charge of everything except for the DC Council.
Right.
And the DC Council, I think, is not really equipped to do the monitoring and the accountability that's needed. They're a state legislature. They are also a local city council.
Yeah.
They're busy looking at alley closings. They're
Yeah.
busy looking at everything that goes on in this city. They can't even pay much attention.
Right. Which
to
is the reason
education.
why there is a need for an independent
Yeah.
outside. They do have the authority to create such an agency because
Yeah.
they don't have the time for the oversight. So create someone who does. That's
But
independent.
I'm in favor of an independent organization. But given that this is the District of Columbia, where do we find such a beast? You know,
Well-
how do we find those people? Because this is the most political town in the world.
Well, there was supposed to be an ombudsman position, and it's mentioned several times in the report that it came into being, had no authority, and then was abolished for a while, and
Yeah,
they've
they
recreated
defunded
it.
it.
And it was only in, you know, when I read this that I knew there was one at all. But
But
there's,
we have an ombudsman, and
Right.
actually she's good.
Yeah, she
But
is.
an ombudsman
That's not their job.
doesn't do oversight.
Right, that's
An
not their job.
ombudsman is a mediator,
Right.
someone who helps individual people
Situations, yeah.
with their
Right.
situations with the school system, for that matter, with the charter schools. But that's not the ombudsman's job.
And although we don't have the same structure as Chicago, there's nothing that prevents us from having a similar consortium, a university
That's
here that may be
yeah.
interested in doing
Yeah.
that. There is
Yeah.
a way to do that.
Oh, yeah,
But
Given
absolutely.
that most
first
of our
is to-
universities are private, they
Yes.
can do this
Right.
and develop that within them a department that is going to be
Right.
completely independent
The
to do
first
this.
step is to have the council to admit that they do not have the time for the oversight and to find someone who can. The first step is acknowledging the fact they do not have the time.
Yeah, well, that's going to be difficult, you know. You know, if you're a council member, you know, you got your chest stuck out. You know, you're not going to admit that I don't have time for
But
this.
but you know, and that is not an admission of guilt or anything. It's basically saying that they are interested in having unbiased data and an organization that is totally independent of OSSI, the mayor, and DCPS that is going to report to them
Yeah.
information they need to make informed decisions.
And they should.
I think that they would want that.
Yeah.
Yes.
You would think.
We've had
And-
a couple of good reports from the DC auditor,
Okay. That's a start.
and
But-
that's a start. But of course, the DC auditor's office is very small.
Right.
okay, and I'm going to do, in this last segment, we're going to do two major questions. One is, what was left out of this report, in our opinion, that really should have been covered? And then the second question, which is often asked to people who are against the current education reform initiatives that are going on pretty much all over the country under the auspices of the Broad family and the Gates family and the Walton family, who seem to have taken over public education. What would we do differently? What sort of reform should have been initiated here in DC? How would we recommend changing things? Who would like to start off?
I'll start off because I mentioned this as a reviewer of the report. What I think was missing was the process was flawed from the beginning. And what I mean by that is that there should have been a study conducted to establish a baseline. Okay, that wasn't done. So the study that this ended up being, I think, is essentially flawed because we don't know where we started from. Okay, this is where we are now, but where did we start from? So how do we compare where we started from to where we are now? So I was a little concerned about this process itself, you know, because when they went to para and mayoral control in 2007, the first thing that should have been done is okay, we need to assess where we are now. Okay, and when they went to that, there was no, what data did they use to even push that? They just came up with the idea when the mayor was running, when he won the, when 50 won the primary, all of a sudden he wants to take control of the schools. You know, well, here in DC, if you win the primary, you're basically winning the general election because this is a Democrat city. And so that kind of just went, you know, he slid that in under the radar, you know, and so, and that's how we
He
got
did
here.
not mention it during his
Right,
campaign.
right.
Not a word.
Right, you know, and so, you know, but if there was concern about assessing students and mayoral control, we should have started at that point. Okay, we're going to see where we are and establish a baseline. I just think that, you know, this is kind of flawed. You know, that's my opinion.
I think they kind of touched on when they looked at impact about this value-added measures for teachers, but they really didn't really get into it. Like, we're not questioning whether a value-added measure is effective. We're just questioning how it was used. Can we question whether it's effective or
And
not?
I think they don't question it because no one understands impact.
Exactly.
No one understands the process. No one understands the algorithms. No one understands how it's applied, but it has this heavy weight in DC. So I think, you don't address what you don't understand.
Exactly.
And it's really ironic that the researchers who basically calculate value added made a mistake on the scores, miscalculated the scores of over 50 teachers in DC a year or so ago.
Yeah.
So I'm beginning to wonder, not only did the researchers who created it understand it, but how are teachers and the school district
Well, some of
expect
the
to
people who
understand
created it, Linda Darling Hammond, who's out with Stanford, and I met with her, and we talked about research for young faculty, and she's like, look, we created this, but not to be used the way it's being used.
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
please do your research
Right.
around why this is not a way to evaluate teachers.
Absolutely.
You can't just, look, we're all about data, and data is important, but can we step back? Data can only tell you so much, right? You can't have this unwavering belief that data is going to answer all your questions, because it's not going to do that. And we talked about data and how they use data, and data walls in schools, and teachers, it's almost a bad word. Like, you tell a teacher the word data and they're just going to cringe, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, except when it's used poorly.
And of
so
course,
I wish they
Or
would
as a
and I'm glad you
punitive
brought up her
measure.
name, because Linda Darling Hammond, I believe, is the one who said the effectiveness of a teacher evaluation program is based on how well the teachers like it. Teachers in the district hate impact.
And I've seen teachers leave. I had a student graduate from Howard University, taught DC public schools for 3 years, could not make the impact score high enough. She's in Atlanta. She
Right.
just couldn't take it anymore. Good teacher, but felt like this system, she was never going to progress far enough, not getting the raise, they're throwing out there the money, that sort of thing. She left the entire school system.
And I'm sorry, that begs the question, what support is put into place for teachers who aren't meeting satisfied? Like, what strategic research-based instructional support does DCPS give to educators who aren't meeting satisfactory?
None, because they don't know what it measures.
Exactly.
I've talked to instructional coaches, and I said, well, isn't this your job to understand this? We don't know. We don't understand
Well,
this.
right
Right.
now
You
we are
know?
meeting with instructional coaches, Denisha, who are basically being informed that their job description is being restructured. So they don't have a clue.
No.
What they shared with us, the role of the instructional coaches provided to them by DC Public Schools, many of them reported that they're doing duties far beyond that. They're doing tests, everything from almost janitorial work to doing duty in cafeteria before and after school, but not providing support to the new teachers that are coming into our school district, which may account for the high turnover rate that we're experiencing. This year we inducted 750 new teachers. Last year almost 700. Prior to that almost 700. Our turnover rate, it's the average turnover rate in the nation is
But that's
16.
the goal, isn't it? Aren't we trying to not have teachers teach for life? We want you in and out. We
Say
are
it.
creating systems that want
TFA.
teachers to do this for 2 years and then go do
But,
something
but
else.
And
wait
why
a
is that?
second. The
And
problem
why?
with that is that's only for poor kids.
Exactly.
At the
Exactly.
Sidwell Friends, at the St. Albans, at the Marays, and the Lakeside School, and all those other private schools like the Lab School in Chicago, those people who come in there and teach there, they often do teach for life. They
Yes,
actually
career educators.
career
And
educators.
Absolutely.
I would agree and disagree. It's not only for the private schools. Look at the other school systems around DC that are
That are
public,
thriving, doing
that
well.
are thriving, and
Yes.
have teachers that have 40, 45-year careers.
Check
But it's
this.
across the country, though, that in the inner cities, it is what's happening, and in poor areas, that it is becoming sort of like a rent
Insta-teacher.
institute.
Teacher,
5
kids.
weeks of training,
Yes.
where the training consists of having this many kids.
But if you
Exactly.
recall when Michelle Rhee came to DC, the first thing she said was if after 5 years you should go home.
Yes.
The second thing was collaboration is overrated. We should have known we were in trouble then. That trend has continued
But
over the past 8
I'm going to
years.
say, check this out. Recently, Chancellor Kaya Henderson, when she had the State of the Public Schools interview with
Jim
Vance,
Yes.
she stated that churn is not necessarily a
problem.
bad thing.
Churn is horrible.
And they don't understand though. If you don't, if you're coming from that mindset, and Kaya Henderson does come from that mindset, this whole new, Teach for America or Teach Like a Champion or all of these broad, that
Teach for a minute.
yeah, teach for a while.
Okay.
Yeah, teach for a
Teach for a
while.
while.
But again, that would never suffice in upper income neighborhoods and schools. schools.
No.
If you think those parents would allow someone with 5 weeks training to come teach your child, guess again, they would never allow. But it's okay to poor, low-income black children who need more than anyone else to get these temporary teachers. And when you talk to them, they feel set up. They're embarrassed to tell me when I tell them I'm a teacher educator, oh, I'm a Teach for America. I didn't know what I was getting into. I didn't know. I thought
many
it
of
would
them
be
don't.
better. You know, and that's okay. But 2 years and then move on and leave that classroom and that school without having a, we know what long-term teachers do for schools and communities, right? It makes it somewhere to go and somewhere to be. And
Right, they'll say, Mr. So-and-so teaches at such and such a school, or Mrs. So-and-so. Make sure you get her.
course.
She's really good. He's really good.
Or it's like, you taught my mom, and you taught my dad,
But
and
let's
you
be
taught my
honest.
uncle.
It's a money issue. It's a money issue when you have high teacher churn. You don't pay the high salaries. You don't look at pensions. So I mean, when you get down to it, it's a monetary decision.
But you pay $4,000 for every Teach for America recruit. Howard University School of Education does not get that money from school districts, and we produce teachers. So you're spending the money. DFA makes a ton of money.
Oh,
like
yeah.
But you're not investing in teachers for a long time.
Exactly.
Which is what is not the intent. It's the privatization, and I'm not going to deviate from this, is driving a lot of decisions that are being made around our schools in D.C.
Privatization.
It is about money and real estate.
Hey,
Yes.
hey, I call
Money
it
and real estate. And we've got to just
And
cut
that's
to
what
the
mayor
chase.
control allows. It allows for privatization. That could not have happened under an elected school board.
course.
Because it
And-
would have just blown up. You wouldn't have had enough
Exactly.
support.
I call it the education industrial complex, similar to the
Exactly.
prison industrial complex
Right.
of the 60s. But getting back to the original question, there are findings in this report, but what's really glaringly missing are solid recommendations.
Exactly.
Solid recommendations. And they had conversations outside of this report with different constituencies. I know they had talked to community members and teachers and other folks, because I was interviewed as a part of that process. I don't really see that reflected in here. So that's missing out of this report. There's a lot missing out of this report. That's why I say, for the money they spent, I don't think they got their money's worth.
But then I have the question, and I absolutely agree with the solid recommendations, but then I'm the so what chick. Oh, so what? You gave me solid recommendations. Who's going to hold people's feet to the fire to make sure we follow through on these recommendations? And I think in D.C. that's where we fall apart.
And that's the issue.
We've gotten recommendations before.
Mayoral control, the mayor. That's who we got to hold to. And we only get to do that every 4 years.
And the mayor can choose not to do anything about it.
Right.
That's what we're
But
getting
Thomas,
at.
I beg to differ with you on, there were some recommendations, and one of them
Oh,
is that
okay,
there
well-
be more cross-sector collaboration. That is a recommendation, because that basically prevents the mayor from making decisions unilaterally. It asks for more collaboration with business, community activists, community organization, other stakeholders. This business of making decisions about schools and any other agencies in isolation.
Was that a finding or was that an actual recommendation?
That was it. Well, it said that we came up short in 4 major areas. Cross-sector collaboration was one, and that's huge.
That was a finding. They found that to be the case,
Accountability was another,
Yeah.
and that is huge.
Right,
So
yes.
most of what we've discussed here
Yeah.
today has been about
Right.
accountability only at one level. It does not rise above the local schools. Everybody else gets away
Right.
with clean hands.
And so the question as to what do we want to see, it's that idea that education can't do it alone. If we're going to put the hopes of a generation being able to be college and career ready solely on the backs of teachers and
not gonna
principals,
work.
it'll never happen.
Never happen.
We need economic investments in their communities.
Parents
we
and communities.
need health care for their parents and their
Yes.
families. We
Yeah.
can't expect teachers to do all this
Yes.
and then fire the bad teachers for not raising test scores when we do nothing else to improve their lives. It can't just be solely on education.
right.
One of the things I learned from Ross Baraka when he spoke here in D.C. when he was running for mayor in New Jersey and won, is he had some really good ideas. He was a principal himself in the Newark, New Jersey school system, and his suggestion was have a lot of wraparound services so that kids didn't have to leave school to get their tonsils checked or get their glasses checked or the hearing checked or get their shots. They could do it right in school. And there's other recommendations. There are a lot of kids who are hungry, and when there's a long weekend like this one, the kids are out to yesterday, today, Sunday, and Monday for Columbus Day. Some of those kids are really going to be hungry and have feeding operations and a whole bunch of other things like that that had not occurred to me but really would make sense. You could have mental health for some of the kids who are you know.
It's interesting you said, because I've been singing that song. I started singing that song to Mayor Fenty. We need to control the schools, because you have to integrate those support services into the educational process. You know, and the mayor, as the executive, has that control and power to do that. You know, everything you do. And one thing here in the District of Columbia, the one-time parents are required to come to school, and that is to register. So why don't we take that opportunity to do a further assessment of what's happening within that family and with that student, especially if the student was out a large amount of days unexcused. Maybe their grades might be a trigger. Set up a menu of triggers. So, okay, this family needs some attention. We need, and we need to apply those wraparound services, whatever they assess them, and provide those resources.
And Thomas, the Washington Teachers Union has been proposing for the past 6 years an expansion of the community school model, which does exactly what you're talking about, guys. Provide the wraparound services. The union invited all council members and the mayor last year to visit 2 community schools, turned around over the course of 6 years in Baltimore.
Yeah.
We asked the chancellor, and she actually accommodated the union when she accompanied our former president to Connecticut to see the community schools there. It is a model that has been proven to work.
Yes.
However, the mayor has agreed to expand community schools, double the numbers while she is in office. The chancellor has seen the positive results that we get from them. The point is, why are we considering handing over more of our public schools to charter schools when we have a model that has already been proven to work, that does not allow schools to sort and cherry pick children? The community school model is the answer. The recommendations have been there.
I was a part of the team that worked on the legislation with DC Voice. DC Voice, they helped write the legislation for community schools. I was supposed to be on that advisory committee, but they didn't select me. But they started with $200,000 in the beginning, so they've increased that budget. But community schools is a great model.
It is.
We have give it to the charter schools. I mean, there's talk about people saying, well, aren't community schools going to be charter schools? I mean, they can actually, create community schools, community charter schools.
Community schools are not charter schools.
No.
They are public schools.
They're public schools.
And of course, if we have 11 in the city now. We had 9. We added 2. The mayor has promised to double the numbers, so I'm hoping that she's going to allow 9 others to
But they need to be
grow.
fully resourced.
Yes.
Fully resourced.
Fully
And if we follow the national model, it will work.
Yeah.
We can't just cherry pick and sort pieces of it,
Right.
such as extended time, extended day.
Yeah. Right.
That's just a
Right.
knee-jerk
Right.
reaction. You want to take one part of a strategy and use it and not utilize the other parts. Extended time does not mean that we're going to get the results. We have extended day programs already in 26 schools. Some of those schools are pulling back because it has not yielded the results that they expected. It's about looking at a better day for students, giving them more time on test prep and testing is not going to do it.
Hey, if you're building a house, you need more than a hammer. You need everything. You need all the tools in the toolbox.
Absolutely.
Right. What I've seen in at least some of the charter schools when I was mentoring for Math for America, which has nothing to do with Teach for America,
I know. That is true.
it's important. They're totally different. But at some of the charter schools, I mean, the kids are there from 7:30 in the morning till 4:30 in the evening or longer, and they stay in one room the entire day. The only 2 times they leave the room are to go to the bathroom and to go out right into the hall to pick up a wrapped up, lunch. And that's it. 7:30 to 4:30. I mean, that's cruel and unusual punishment. And if that's what you're doing with your extended day, forget it.
Yeah.
We also see that the discipline in a lot of those schools. I had a professor
Oh, it's
colleague
terrible.
go to one school, and I said, I thought it was a public school, Stanton, but it's now a charter school in the public school. And I was going to help them with their behavior problems, but it's not the children, it's how they respond to behavior. Like, you're setting, these no excuses models, these, and when you look at DC and suspension rates and those kind of discipline, which is something else I'd like to see, focus on that really didn't come across in here, is that what are we doing? And is that how we're getting our graduation rates? Because we're pushing kids out of the door? We're suspending them till we just don't count them anymore. We're expelling them so we don't follow them anymore. But it flows from this model that these poor, low-income, black and brown children need to be obedient all day long, walking in a straight line. Don't look, don't move your. I mean, who does that?
It's
That's
called
how we treat
social
prisoners.
engineering.
Like, I don't
It
understand.
does not
the
work.
prison pipeline and getting them ready.
Yeah.
I've seen that as well. I was amazed. I went into a charter school, and they were when they come out of the classroom, they immediately go to the right and then walk in the line. They look like little robots walking down the hallway.
You know what I would love for
amazed.
you to do, each one of you? Go online and take a look at the student parent guide for parents who send their kids to KIPP in DC and any other part of the nation. See if you would be willing to sign the contract to submit your child to the rules. They are very close. It comes very close to that of a correctional facility.
Wow.
And what one researcher described it as, sure, they are able to get their test scores up. And that's wonderful. We want to do the same. But they liken their curriculum to social engineering more so than critical learning. And that's serious.
And we see these students come to university. I have students, I went to a charter school, and these are the students who are like, can you just tell me what's going to be on the test? They have no desire to want to learn anything because they weren't fostered that in school. They were just taught to prepare for a test, and that's all. And I'm looking at them like, no, you need to think, you need to discuss, you need to analyze, and they're like, no, I don't.
But you can make culture and climate in a school conducive to teaching and learning without regimenting kids to all that, all that stuff.
Well, back to what Denisha said, critical thinkers, they revolt and they create coups, and so we don't want critical thinkers
such
in our
as yourself.
Such as myself. Thank you. We don't want critical thinkers in urban schools. We want people who are very obedient and submissive, and so that's what we're getting.
And that's why I say college and career ready is not what you think it is. It is low wage work and debt ready. We want a mass of people who will clock in, clock out, never question anything,
That's
do
why
their job.
That's why Walmart is running. Is interested in education.
They want more people
now
who
we
will
can
work
cultivate
that way.
it globally.
Not the people who we had coming from the schools before who rose up and said, this is not right, and I'm going to fight back, and no, we don't want that.
Hey, God, I know you're the host today, but I have a question. I'm like, where do we go from here?
Well, we need to talk about this in more detail. we have touched on where do we go from here, what would we include.
Yeah.
But certainly community schools would be part of the model, I think. And, there are probably some good charter schools who are doing some good things, and we could learn from that. But we don't hear anything about what they should do, except that teach like a champion thing. Oh my God! That is the worst.
It is the most racist thing I've
seen.
read in a long time, and we're going to be. I'm working with some faculty. We are going to pull this apart in a way that research-based that we can put. It's got to stop. I have never seen anything so horrible. No nonsense nurturing. Teachers with walkie-talkies in their ear, being told by people in the back of the room what to say to the children.
Tell them
you're like Tom Brady.
expressed.
Tom Brady has the earpiece, and you're like, she's like, I'm not like Tom Brady. And the kids are looking at you like, will you please talk to me and stop being a robot, Mrs. So-and-so? I mean, it is absolutely horrible.
Well, we're missing the whole social emotional component in education. We really are. We really are.
That component is for wealthy children.
Oh, absolutely.
The ones who will lead the world.
Right.
The ones who will follow the curriculum that we're designing here is for them.
And that's why this is global, like you said. This is happening everywhere. They realize what can happen with educated people. And it's always been a fear of educated black people. And they're putting the lock on that,
You got that right.
And they're doing it in other countries too. They don't want the masses knowing their rights and feeling empowered.
Right.
Okay, we could go on, and I certainly hope that we get to do more of this. But we're going to have to stop this at this point, and I want to thank again my guests. And I'm going to refer to my notes because always when I'm introducing people, that's why I blank. Okay, so we have Mary Levy, Independent Analyst of Education, Finance, and Policy. Denisha Jones, Assistant Professor in the School of Education at Howard University. Thomas Bird, host, executive producer of the Education Town Hall radio show, chairman of the Ward 8 Educational Council. Elizabeth Davis, president, Washington Teachers Union, and Odell Cawthorn, adjunct professor at Loyola College in Maryland, and not too long ago, a principal not too many blocks from this studio. And I'm Guy Brandenburg, a retired DC public school teacher and a blogger, and also a former DCPS student, and my kids went through DC public schools. And if you want more information on any of this stuff, you could do worse than going to my own website blog. I've got lots of graphs like I showed you earlier, and you go to GF Brandenburg, like the Gates and Berliner Concerto.wordpress.com. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Guy. All right.